Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today is the post-game podcast from the second consecutive Timberwolves road win over the Portland Trail Blazers. We'll break down that game, plus an All-Star Weekend preview. I'll give my picks for the three-point contest featuring Karl-Anthony Towns, the skills competition featuring Anthony Edwards, and also my pick for the dunk contest, too. We'll talk about all that on the show today. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Friday, everybody. Victory Friday. It's also the weekend. Happy weekend and All-Star weekend. One of the best weekends of the entire year is upon us. The Wolves they don't play again for a week. It's like a week from today when they play again. So lots to get to here today. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off. A big thank you, first of all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right, quick roadmap for today. We're going to start with the Portland game. Of course, this is the post-game podcast after all, but I'm going to condense things just a little bit so I can get to my All-Star Weekend picks because I love predicting this. I love checking it out on FanDuel. Our friends over at FanDuel will talk about some of those odds. And there's a lot of Wolves participation in this game. So, all right, let's start with Wolves Blazers. So, of course, Timberwolves beat the Blazers on Tuesday. They stayed in Portland, the weird like home and home, but not really because both games are in the same city situation. But two consecutive games against the same team in the same arena. And, there were no variables for either team. Like they both were there. Obviously, Portland was at home, but there was no travel. The rest was the same. And I was a bit concerned, and I said this on Thursday's show, just because neither team really, like both teams are looking ahead to the All-Star break. I'm sure there's some guys in the Wolves and the coaching staff, they're all looking at, we got to go to Indy. We got to get there. This I think it was literally the last game of the first quote unquote half of the season to tip off for anybody was the Wolves late last night in Portland. And all things equal, I thought that would bring the teams closer together. There'd be less of a variance in terms of would the talent really shine through because the game, in the Wolves' mind, hey, let's just get to the All-Star break, right? Well, that's not what happened. In fact, it was the opposite to start. The Timberwolves jumped all over Portland and were up 44-14 at the end of the first quarter. Just an insane. It was easily one of the best overall quarters of basketball the Timberwolves had played all season. Portland, they didn't shoot the ball well, but the Wolves had a couple possessions where there was one where the Blazers got a 15-foot one-handed runner at the end of the shot clock because nothing was open. The Wolves were really, really good. At that point, it felt like they could win this game by 50, 60 points. And it was everybody. Everyone was scoring. Everyone was contributing. It was, yes, a lot of Ant, but everybody, the ball movement was fantastic. Conley had a weird double clutch putback where he hung in the air, was going to pass it, and then still just stuff that weirdly confident passing, but not in a bad way. They turned it over a little too much early. There were a couple sloppy possessions. I think they had 4 turnovers in the first quarter. They toned it down a little and finished with 13 for the game, which is palatable, right? But it was all cylinders. All cylinders in the first quarter. Second quarter was not the exact opposite because the Wolves at least held their own a little bit offensively. But defensively, they completely slacked off. There just was no intensity. And when you're up 30 in the second quarter, second unit comes in, I can understand how that can slide. So Portland wins the second quarter by 15 points. And now it's a 15-point game at halftime. But then it continued into the third quarter. First part of the third quarter, the Blazers got the game all the way down to 8 points. This was an 8-point game after Minnesota had a 30-point lead in the first quarter. And then Anthony Edwards showed up. And after scoring 41 in Portland on Tuesday, he dropped 34 on just 21 shots in this game. 3 of 7 on threes, was efficient from outside the arc, was efficient at the line, 7 of 8. And another fantastic assist to turnover game for Anthony Edwards. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. But he's on you could say he was on a heater shooting the ball last night. He's on an assist to turnover, called a Tyus Jones-like heater in that regard over the last week. It's been really incredible. But like third quarter, the Wolves really did pull away, and it became a 23-point game going to the fourth. And I mean, you had Anthony Edwards trying to actually second quarter, Anthony Edwards tried to bank in. He did bank in a free throw. And like, I don't know, his first quarter, he did that. It was his first quarter in a 30-point game. Anthony Edwards was like, you know what? I banked in a couple angle threes, from just above the break, the last two blowouts, the Milwaukee game, the Clippers game. I'm just going to bank in a free throw because we're up 30 in the first quarter. It's hilarious, but then he tried to do it when it was a closer game. I think it was early third quarter. He tried to do it again and he missed. That was the only free throw he missed in this game, by the way. So I guess it kind of serves him right. It's hilarious when it's the fourth quarter of a blowout and it's just kind of your thing is to just bank shots in from everywhere, but it's going to catch up with him. And I guess it did in a very inconsequential way with the missed free throw and a blowout win. But anyway, it was a really, really fun game overall, besides that second quarter and the first part of the third quarter. It was essentially 2.5 quarters of complete dominance, and about as dominant as you're ever going to see one NBA team over another. It really was. Coming into the game, I had concerns about turnovers. Portland, despite being a bad defensive team, they were fourth in the league in defensive turnover rate, so they do force opponents to commit turnovers, and they did. I mean, the Wolves, like I said, they had 4 in the first quarter, 13 for the game. A little bit more of a turnover-prone game than you'd expect. But on the flip side, the Wolves have been playing more and more of the high wall coverage. They're blitzing pick and rolls a little bit more often. They're trying to use their length on the perimeter. And I think it's more about switching up coverages and being able to mix in and do different things rather than only playing drop. And I should say, they haven't only played drop all season, right? And that's part of what Rudy Gobert's given. Rudy Gobert used to only play drop coverage in Utah. And Minnesota said, hey, we'll mostly play drop when you're on the floor, Rudy, but let's mix in some other coverages. They've done that lately, and they turned Portland over a bunch early in this game. And, I mean, it was also part of the Wolves kind of pushing back against Portland was they just got a bunch of steals in a row. Like, and I think it was Scoot Henderson picked his pocket, like, just the ball pressure, the length in the passing lanes, things like that forced Portland into 15 turnovers. And Minnesota's defense overall early in the season was not turning other teams over. And partly that was in part because they were playing a lot of drop and just kind of packing the paint and, funneling shots to the middle of the floor, really to the mid range as much as possible. And, I guess the next best thing is above the break threes, right? Instead of corner threes, instead of paint attempts, instead of short shots near the rim. And so opponent effective field goal percentage was very low, but the Wolves weren't forcing that many turnovers. And now they've mixed this in a little bit. They're playing a little bit more zone to switch things up. They're playing a little bit more high wall like they did a couple of years ago, almost exclusively with Vando on the team. And they're wreaking a little bit more havoc. And against a young team like Portland, I mean, like Jeremy Grant's really the only guy, Simon Style has a little bit of experience, but the only perimeter guy with any significant experience on this team in terms of the Blazers. And the Wolves providing some of that, additional pressure on the perimeter really went a long way in this game. I thought that was a really smart thing that the Wolves did. And it also forced their guys to be more active, right? It forced the Wolves players to be more locked in instead of just, not that they would mail it in defensively, but some version of mailing it in was a legitimate concern coming into the last game before the All-Star break. I don't think there's any question about that. So I thought that was smart by the Timberwolves coaching staff to use a more aggressive defense in this game to try and force the issue, I guess, in a sense. All right, I want to do a couple more takeaways. I want to talk about Ant specifically, and then probably midway through next segment, I think we'll get right into All-Star Weekend. A lot to get to there, so we'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. Let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And I'll go with Benedict Mathurin. We're going to talk about him in just a minute here. He's going to be in the skills competition as part of Team Pacers. Now with Buddy Hield in Philadelphia, no longer a Pacer, there should be more minutes for Benedict Mathurin. I'm a big Mathurin fan. I liked him in the draft. I liked him as really a top 10 pick kind of throughout the process. So I would pick him up. With no Buddy Hield, there's just more minutes in Indy. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows the championship team is about each player being perfect. It's the exact same with your vehicle. My first vehicle is a 95 Mercury Tracer, which I know puts a date, an age on me, I guess, a little bit, but it was a great car. Fantastic. I wish eBay Motors had been around at that time. I would have taken better care of it. I'm sure my dad would have made me take better care of it. Would have just been more accessible to get the parts that I needed to keep it running, keep it looking fresh too. It's very important when I started driving was, as fresh as a 95 Mercury Tracer could be, even in 95, honestly. But with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. By the way, I wasn't driving in 95. I didn't get a brand new car for my first car. I said that weird, but you know what I mean. A 95 Mercury Tracer wasn't gonna look fresh no matter what, but I still loved it. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today available now on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, some takeaways from this one. Let's talk about Ant. I mean, come on. Anthony Edwards is playing awesome headed into the All-Star break, and here's hoping that he gets some good rest after the game Sunday and kind of maintains this extended heater that he's been on. I mean, like, there were, like, I don't know, he's been playing extremely well. Going back to the Dallas game that the Wolves won, he only scored 9 points in back on January 31st. But in the month of February, he's averaging 31 points on 51, 37, 83 shooting splits. He had that 1 of 11 from outside the arc against the Clippers, but remember, he was 7 of 7 on twos in that game, and the assist to turnover was awesome. For the month, he's averaging 5 assists to 2 turnovers, which isn't perfect, but over the last 4 games, this is insane. Over the last 4 games, Anthony Edwards has 26 assists and only 4 turnovers. Going back to the Milwaukee win. So in this 4-game winning streak, 26 assists to 4 turnovers. Now, I'm not suggesting he's going to be Tyus Jones, Mike Conley, Monte Morris, Trey Jones, insert your favorite assist to turnover champion here. I don't think that's him. That's not the way he plays. And he's going to be a little bit loosey-goosey. He has to be unpredictable to be, I shouldn't say, he doesn't have to be effective. But the more in that direction he goes, the better. Because it's not just the lack of turnovers, it's also the increase in assists. Because we've seen him, like the few games before that, he had a game where he had 1 assist to 4 turnovers. That was the win over the Rockets. You go back a little bit further, and he had a 12 assist game with 4 turnovers, which is when you also score 32, you can handle 32 and 12 with 4 turnovers because he's so high usage and it's going to happen. Turnovers are going to happen. But to see him turn in 4 straight games with very, very low turnovers, I mean, he had a 9 assist to no turnover, an 8-1, and a 7-1 mixed in there. And also scoring with volume. Like in these 2 Blazers games. I mean, he only had 2 assists on Tuesday, but he had 41 points, and then he had 34.7 assists in this game. Is just so awesome to see. And if that is the start of a trend when it comes to Anthony Edwards taking care of the basketball, like we could start to have a serious conversation about like all NBA, right? I don't know that we're there yet, honestly. Like, I don't know that I could sit here with a straight face, and I'm not, maybe this would be a fun All-Star break topic for one of the shows next week, but talk about like top 15 players, top 20 players in the league, where guys land. I don't think I could sit here right now and argue Anthony Edwards is a top 15 player. I would argue he's a top 25 player. He's probably right around 20, but all NBA is the top 15 players, right? Essentially. I don't think he's quite there yet. But if this is the thing, if now for the last 30 plus games of this season, all of a sudden he's assist to turnover guy plus all the scoring and the 3-point shooting and everything he's doing, then absolutely. Like, let's have that conversation here in the next month to 6 weeks. If this keeps up, that really is kind of the final frontier for him. In terms of the overall, like, obviously he could keep getting better in every area, but the one thing that he still struggles with is the consistency with his passing. And along with that, shot selection. But again, he's shooting with efficiency. Like, he's been an efficient scorer this year. For him to take as many shots as he does, you just look at raw field goal percentage, 47% is pretty good for somebody who shoots the basketball as much as he does. But then we could also talk about, true shooting, effective field goal percentage. Like, those numbers are all positive for Anthony Edwards. So shot selection is a thing, but it really is, can he assist while keeping turnovers low? And he's been doing that lately. It's been awesome to see. All right. I don't really have any other major takeaways from this game other than the Wolves did good enough on the glass. They ended up a plus 17 and only allowed 9 offensive rebounds. Obviously, plus 17 is really good, but 9 offensive rebounds, still a little bit high for Portland, but there was a lot of garbage time in this game. And just looking at the box score won't tell you a whole lot. We could do studs and duds here quick before we move into All-Star break. I'll do this pretty quick. Ant, obviously 34-7 and 6 rebounds, 2 steals, only 1 turnover, also had a block. He was a plus 36 in this game, which is just funny. Like, nobody else was better than a plus 26 for Minnesota. They won this game by, what'd they win by? 37? Yeah, they won by 37, and Ant was a plus 36, 12 of 21 shooting, 3 of 7 on threes, 7 of 8 at the line. An awesome Ant game. Also go Karl-Anthony Towns. Cat was very efficient in this game. Good to see after he'd had some rougher games here lately in terms of foul trouble. 23 points, 8 rebounds, 8 of 13 shooting. Only shot 2 threes in this game, 6 of 6 at the line. A couple of blocks for Cat, a couple of dominant blocks, just walling up at the rim as well. Rudy was solid. I'm not going to give him a stud. I am going to give, we'll go Jaden McDaniels. Jaden really kind of, especially in the first quarter, was like, he wasn't letting any of these young Blazers past him defensively. He was phenomenal. Played well offensively too, which was good to see after an 0 for the other night from the field. 17 points at 6 of 11 shooting, 1 of 4 on threes. Got to the line 4 times, which is unusual for Jaden. Made all 4 of his free throws. 5 rebounds, 2 steals for Jaden McDaniels. Very, very strong game for him. I don't really have any duds. I mean, it was a quiet game for Slow-Mo. 2.7. He did have 7 rebounds in 21 minutes, 3 assists, but he had 2 turnovers. Not a bad game, just a quiet game. Alexander Walker had the second best plus minus on the team for whatever that's worth. And a lot of it's because that perimeter defense, along with Jaden, was fantastic, but he was just 1 of 6 from the field and missed all 4 of his 3-point attempts. Not, just one of those nights, but not a dud necessarily. I think everybody played well for the most part. It was that bench unit was a little shaky in the second quarter, but ultimately it was just fine. So, we kind of did the first half like 10,000 foot look on Thursday, but the Wolves are 39-16. They, of course, have the Western Conference, or they have the number 1 spot in the Western Conference, I should say. They are a game and a half clear of OKC, who finished on a 2-game win streak in the first half. The Wolves now, by the way, have the best point differential in the Western Conference, second best in the NBA. You could just straight point differential. You could also look at the net rating on cleaning the glass, which takes out garbage time. And the Wolves are number 2 there as well. So I kind of, no matter how you slice it and dice it, they're the second best team in the NBA. They just are. And you can look at the next layer. Like, I mean, they split 2 with Boston. They've split 4 with the Thunder. They're 2-0 against the Clippers. They're 1-0 against the Nuggets. Like, look at the next teams that you would want to discuss as the next best teams in the league. Obviously, Philly's not even in the conversation with them beat out. They've beat Milwaukee in the only game they played, albeit a shorthanded Milwaukee team. They haven't played Cleveland yet. They split 2 with the Knicks. So the Wolves have played the best teams in the league extremely well. And they are legitimately now the second best team in the NBA. And there's really no question about it, which is just an awesome thing to say. All right. I'm going to tee up what I'll do next. We'll spend the whole last segment talking about All-Star Weekend. I'm going to give my predictions. I'm going to say who I think would win in terms of just straight up even odds. Like, if we were just picking straight up who I think will win each competition. Also give my pick based on the FanDuel odds, although there are not FanDuel odds for some reason on the Slam Dunk Champion. But we'll talk about that too. And then I'll just give a quick who I think will win the All-Star game, although that's always such a weird thing. And I honestly haven't studied the rosters that closely, so I'm going to kind of do that on the fly. But I already have my pick set for the other competitions, and you better believe I'll be over at FanDuel on Saturday. All-Star Saturday is one of my favorite days of the year. So we'll get to all that here next. And also, obviously, Ant and Cat are part of the whole thing because they're each in a competition on Saturday. So lots of Ant and Cat talk here coming up as well. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you could still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match either. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, let's close this thing out with my predictions for All-Star Weekend. Let's start with the skills competition because that is the first thing on Saturday night. It's interesting. When I looked at this, I looked at who was competing before I looked at the odds, and I picked Team Pacers just based on who's on each of these teams, and I'll explain why. So Team Pacers is Haliburton, Benedict Mathurin, who I mentioned earlier, Miles Turner. Team Top Pick is Paolo Banchero, Anthony Edwards, and Victor Wembanyama. And then Team All-Stars, just a bunch of random All-Stars, Scotty Barnes, Tyrese Maxey, and Trae Young. Just looking at this, I would have ranked them for a skills competition. This isn't a 3-on-3 tournament, right? And I'm assuming they're not going to drastically change like the nuts and bolts of the competition, like what they're asking these guys to do. I would have gone Pacers Top Pick All-Stars, but the odds are actually reversed. Or I know they're not reversed. Top Picks are actually the favorites at plus 140 on FanDuel. Team All-Stars is plus 180 and Team Pacers is plus 190. I would pick Team Pacers both straight up and with the odds as close as they are. I would go Team Pacers at plus 190. My second pick would be Team Top Picks. I do think that what I like about the Pacers is you have a mix of skills, but all those guys can shoot. And oftentimes this comes down to, like, if I remember right, in the relay, everybody's got to make a three, right? I'm pretty sure. If that's the case, like, I don't know. I think that's the best trio of shooters. Team Top Picks got to have Banchero and Wembanyama hit a three, which I know they can do, but percentage-wise, what are the odds they hit it on their first try? And then also, like, clearly that trio has the most, like, overall, the best mix of, well, actually, no, you could argue Team All-Stars does with Barnes, Maxey, and Young in terms of dribbling, passing, etc. But I think Pacers probably has the advantage. I think this is the sort of thing. Also, I'm not 100% sure Ant takes this super seriously. I think we talked about this on Wednesday on the basketball party show. Ant's going to be goofing around. Like, I know he's super competitive, but, like, he also has that goofy streak where he can be a little bit too cool for school sometimes, which is really funny for somebody that says, you know, people talk about his Jordan-like competitiveness where he locks in and, like, you know, he's getting in a stance down 20. Like, he doesn't, that's 100% true, but he's also goofy. And sometimes he can act a little too cool for school. He does that sometimes during games. And it's just a weird combination. And it's partly it's certainly endearing. I think it's partly what people really like about Ant is that he has the ability to not take things too seriously, but also be really serious. So I don't know. I actually kind of like Team Pacers to win this thing, especially at plus 190. I'm excited to see Ant do it. And I hope I'm wrong. I obviously hope that Ant's team wins, but I would take Pacers up at plus 190 on FanDuel. The 3-point competition. This is my favorite event of the weekend. And I talked about this a little bit on the basketball party Wednesday. So you might've heard my quick take there. The odds have moved. I believe at the time Cat was plus 800 and it was the second longest odds. He's down to plus 700 on FanDuel. And that's fourth best odds out of the out of the 8 contestants. I'm sorry. I can't count. Fifth best odds out of the 8 contestants. The only players with longer odds than him are Donovan Mitchell at plus 750, Jalen Brunson at plus 750, and Lauri Markkanen at plus 800. Markkanen was in it last year and did not perform well. I love Cat at plus 700. I really do. If I was picking this straight up, I might go Tyrese Haliburton. He's plus 450. The favorite is Dame Lillard, who won it last year at plus 390. Haliburton's the second shortest odds at plus 450. Trae Young at plus 550. Former Wolf Malik Beasley at plus 650. And then I gave you Cat, Mitchell, Brunson, and Markkanen. If I had to pick one straight up, I'd probably go with Haliburton. I think the combination of his shot, the way he shoots it, I think is very obviously repeatable for him, and doesn't need to bring the ball high, like doesn't need to jump super high. I think it's, and also he's a 40, like a legit 40% guy. And he played well in it last year, if I remember correctly. I believe he got past the first round and got to the second. So I would pick Halliburton straight up. Given these odds, though, Cat at plus 700. And by the way, there's some books out there that have Cat at even longer odds. FanDuel at plus 700. That's great odds to get Karl-Anthony Towns. The dude won it the last time he was in it. He barely jumps, doesn't really jump when he shoots. And that's the thing. I think Jack mentioned this on Jack Borman from Canis Supus mentioned it on Wednesday's basketball party show that like these guards that have to jump, their legs get tired, or they, in order to be quicker and not get tired as fast, they alter their shots. They're not jumping as high. That could be an issue for some of these smaller guys. Cat just like goes up on his tiptoes. It's super repeatable. He could shoot well off a rack. And that would be my one. I also like Malik Beasley at plus 650. The one thing that I would shy away from there is the way Malik shoots it. He loves to shoot it on the move in transition. He loves to shoot, catch and shoot. He loves to one dribble shoot. I don't know how he's going to shoot off of a rack. That's a different motion. And maybe he's great at it. I don't know. But I would be a little bit worried about it, just given the way that Malik Beasley gets his shots in games, whereas Cat can shoot it flat-footed, double pump, step back, catch and shoot, off the dribble, whatever. Cat can shoot from any platform. And that, I think, to me, he should have better odds to win than Malik Beasley. I think he should have better odds than Trae Young, who's not actually that good of a three-point shooter compared to the other guys in the field. If you look at the percentages for his career, I know he can shoot it from the logo, but how is he going to fare in this competition against guys like, and by the way, Lillard's not shooting it well from three this season. So I understand why he's the favorite. He's won it before and he's a good shooter for his career, but in games the last couple seasons, he hasn't been great. So I straight up, no odds. If I just was picking it, I would probably say Tyrese Halliburton, but Cat at plus 700 is the best bet. It absolutely is. And I think there's a great chance that he wins it. So that's where I would go on FanDuel for sure. All right. Dunk contest Saturday night. There are not odds right now on FanDuel. Maybe that'll change between now, early Friday, and the contest Saturday night. But the favorite, of course, is Mac McClung. Currently in the G League. He won it last year, had 4 dunks that he converted on the first try. I think all but one were perfect 50s, and the other one was like a 49 point something. He's the favorite. I think he'll win it. I think there's a lot of reasons. Well, the easiest answer is he's I guess I don't know if you'd say he's the most athletic overall, but the best leaper of all of them. He's got to have a 46 inch vertical. I think he measured at like 44 at the combine a few years ago, but he jumps out of the gym. He's only 6'2", so it looks that much more impressive. I don't know, no odds on FanDuel, so I'm not really sure how the rest of the field stacks up. I would say my second pick would be Jacob Toppin. He's, I believe, won some dunk contests in college, high school, whatever. Super athletic. 6'8", which is a little bit of a disadvantage to be so tall for the contest, but he's lanky, which sometimes can look a little more impressive. So I don't know. I would go McClung to win it. I depending on how majorly he's favored on FanDuel when this comes out, I don't know that I would bother betting on it because there's enough of if something goes wrong there, somebody else could win. But if like everybody converts their dunks and whatever, he's going to have the best stuff and it's going to look the most impressive. Mac McClung, I think, is pretty clearly the favorite on Saturday night. All right. The game itself, this is, we're going back here. I'm not going to talk Rising Stars. That's too hard to figure out. There's 4 teams. They play a tournament. It'll be fun. Like, the competition will be fun. The teams are fun. There's a lot of really good young players. It's also weird there's no Timberwolves players involved, although I don't think there was last year either. But, there's a couple teams that stand out as I would say favorites. Like Team Pau has Wembanyama, Brandon Miller, Jaquez, Jabari Smith. It's got Brandon Podziemski from the Warriors and Casey Wallace from the Thunder. Just quickly looking over these rosters, Team Detlef is a bunch of G League guys. It's actually only G League guys. I would rank, I don't know. I guess I would rank them Pau, Tamika, Jalen, Detlef in terms of talent on those teams. And also given the format of the game. But I think the team with Wembanyama, Brandon Miller, Jaquez, Jabari Smith, Podziemski, Casey Wallace, and Bilal Coulibaly, that's the team that I would look for. So anyway, my quick roster glance for Rising Stars would be Team Pau. And the actual All-Star game, I don't know. I think given that Embiid's not playing, and I know that you wouldn't think that not having a big, I don't know. I go back and forth on this. I think the West will win. I think that Durant, LeBron, Luka, Devin Booker, I just think there's enough shooting on that team. The East, like if Halliburton might go nuts. It's just such a silly thing to try to pick the All-Star game. I think the West will win. Overall, I just think they're a slightly better roster. I don't, I'm backtracking for what I said on Wednesday on the basketball party. With Chris Finch as the coach, I don't think we're going to see Karl-Anthony Towns and Ant play all that much, which is totally fine because I always hold my breath in these games anyway. So we will see. I would love to see Ant do something awesome and then not play the rest of the game. That would be great. And then Cat hopefully gets a ton of threes up. And hopefully he's coming off a 3-point championship on Saturday. So that's my super quick and unceremonious all-star pick, is that the West will win against the East on Sunday. All right. That's all I have for you today. On Monday, we'll recap All-Star Weekend and set up the rest of the week. I do want to get into some bigger picture stuff next week in terms of, looking ahead, what this team could work on. Might talk a little bit of buyout market. That's got to get figured out in the next week or so. The Wolves have to make a selection on who they're going to fill their roster with. It could be 10-day guys, whatever, but we'll talk about that next week too. Lots to get to here as we set up the second half, unofficial second half, really the last third of the schedule, unofficial second half of the season. That's all we have for you today. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.